GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dewbs & Co, the show where we'll get into some of the things that have got you talking today. Now, have you had a baby in an NHS hospital, I ask? Because a major report has shown that at least 201 babies and 9 mothers who died could have lived if they'd received better NHS care. It doesn't stop there, by the way. Nearly 100 other babies suffered serious injuries, including brain damage. Again, avoidable. This must be a watershed moment for the NHS. But will it be? If you had a baby in the NHS, what was your experience like? And the woman, I don't want to even call her a mother, you know, the one that tortured her own child, ultimately to death, is set to be released. I speak, of course, of the Baby P case. Many of us will be familiar with that. Dominic Raab is going to appeal the decision, but many say if she's indeed a changed character, she should now be allowed out of prison. Should she? And a topic that I wish personally would get much more attention, but it doesn't. I wonder why. Vaccine side effects. I'll be discussing that with the MP, Christopher Chirp. And I wonder, by the way, are we being nudged into a cashless society? Because to me, it certainly feels like that sometimes. Is that a problem? First of all, though, let's get the latest news headlines.
Michelle, thank you. The top stories this hour. A damning report into catastrophic errors at the Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital has found 201 babies and 9 mothers could have survived if they'd received better care. The independent inquiry looked at more than 1,500 clinical instances and revealed repeated failures over a 20-year period. A number of babies suffered fractured skulls and were left brain damaged. Several mothers were refused caesarean sections. The head of the inquiry, Donna Ockenden, says the Trust hadn't learned from its own investigations.
We now know that this is a trust that failed to investigate, failed to learn, and failed to improve. This resulted in tragedies and life-changing incidents for so many of our families.
Well, Sonia Lee, whose baby daughter died in 2000 shortly after birth, says she's waited too long for an apology.
All I ever wanted was somebody to say, I am sorry, I made the mistake, and I will retrain and I will learn from my mistakes, and I never want this to happen again.
The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, says the failures highlighted in the report have no place in the NHS.
To all the families that have suffered so greatly, I am sorry. The report clearly shows that you were failed by a service that was there to help you and your loved ones to bring life into this world. We will make the changes that the report says are needed at both a local and national level.
Sajid Javid. In the last half hour, MPs have approved a bill to allow women in England to continue having access to abortion care at home. The law was temporarily changed during the pandemic to ensure women still had access to the treatment while in lockdown. Today's vote, which had a majority of 27, means these measures will continue. British ports will be given legal powers to refuse entry to ferry operators which don't pay the minimum wage. The Transport Secretary has laid out a package of measures in response to P&O Ferries' decision to sack 800 staff. Grant Shapps says his request to prevent entry to ferry services that don't pay fairly will be in force until the government makes it a legal requirement.
Where new laws are needed, we will create them. Where legal loopholes are cynically exploited, we will close them. And where employment rights are too weak, we will strengthen them.
Grant Shapps. The Prime Minister has faced MPs' questions today on whether he knowingly misled Parliament over parties held in Downing Street during lockdown. That comes after the Met Police found coronavirus laws were broken during lockdown and issued 20 fixed penalty notices. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, accused Boris Johnson of lying about the parties and therefore breaking the ministerial code. The Prime Minister, though, refused to answer questions until police investigations are complete.
And if it has been found that you did break the ministerial code, which, looking at all the things you've said and all the things that have transpired, it's almost pretty crystal clear that you did, that will mean a resignation issue for you.
With great respect, Pete, I think you're just going to have to hold your horses and wait until the conclusion of the investigation.
Boris Johnson. Ukraine's president has demanded the European Union close its ports to Russian vessels. That comes as the country's defence ministry is warning Russian forces are preparing to resume offensive operations. Addressing the Norwegian parliament, President Zelensky said it's quite possible hundreds of children may have been killed during the war, and they warned Russia's aggression isn't slowing down.
The columns of Russian armed vehicles are not decreasing, even though we've destroyed more Russian tanks and other armoured vehicles than Moscow has lost in any other war during the last 50 years.
President of Ukraine. Tom Parker from the band The Wanted has died after being diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumour. The pop star revealed his cancer diagnosis in October 2020 and had begun radiotherapy and chemotherapy. Despite his diagnosis, he recently performed on stage with his bandmates during a reunion tour. The band says he passed away peacefully earlier on today. He was 33 years old. And the Hollywood actor Bruce Willis is stepping away from his career after being diagnosed with aphasia. In an Instagram post, his daughter Ruma confirmed the condition is impacting his cognitive abilities, and as such, he's decided to retire. The 67-year-old is known for films including Die Hard and Sixth Sense. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you're with GB News. Now more from Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, keeping me company until 7 o'clock tonight. My panel, we've got Mark Wallace, who's the Chief Executive of Conservative Home, Rob Lyons, who's the Science Director at the Academy of Ideas, and Pimana Assad, Labour Councillor. And you know the drill on Dewbs & Co by now. It's not just about us here. It's about you at home as well and your thoughts. What's on your mind tonight? In particular, the reaction to the stories that we'll be discussing. You can get in touch with me on email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at gbnews. Don't forget, of course, if you haven't already, subscribe to us on YouTube. All the best bits are on there. You can watch us live. We've got podcasts now. We're on the radio, on DAB+. We're everywhere, so wherever you are tuning in, good evening to you. Our top story tonight, a major review says that more than 200 babies may have died and many others left with life-changing injuries due to catastrophic failings at Shrewsbury and Telford NHS Trust. The review, chaired by senior midwife Donna Erkenden, examined almost 1,600 cases and spanned 20 years. 9 mothers were also found to have died needlessly in the largest ever NHS maternity scandal. Well, joining me now to discuss the findings is Julia Rowlings. Her daughter, Olivia, died very soon after she was delivered at Royal Shrewsbury Hospital in 2002, having suffered multiple head injuries during her birth. What an awful situation. Good evening to you. Thanks for joining us, Julie. I touched there on the story, but just tell us, if you will, what actually happened.
It was the force that they used to deliver Olivia. Olivia was born after a failed Fontus and double forceps delivery, and they caused severe head injuries to Olivia. A lot of bruising, a lot of internal injuries to Olivia that she was never going to survive. I'm not going into detail because it's quite graphic and it would be very upsetting to people. But it wasn't just, it's put down that she had a severe head injury, brain injury, but they caused a lot of injuries to Olivia when she was being delivered.
Julia, I'm so sorry. I mean, it must be awful. I don't even, you don't ever recover from something like that. How do you feel today? Because this report, it's been long promised, it's been delayed multiple times. The truth is now out. How does that make you feel?
There's relief. There's a lot of different emotions. There's relief that we've reached the end. There's pride in every mother that found the courage, every mother, every father as well, who found the courage to speak out and finally get all our voices heard. There's apprehension, anxiety about it all, and just a sheer hope that they're listening this time. But I don't see how they can't listen because it's out there. So I'm hopeful, but yeah, it's a difficult one. There's just so many emotions being felt today.
I can absolutely imagine. And you say that you're hopeful. Do you think that change will occur? Because when we look at this report, the thing that pops out is that lessons weren't learned, mistakes were repeated over and over and over again. And you know, do you have hope? Do you have faith, actually, that changes will now happen, that this will be a watershed moment?
I have hope. I don't have faith. The Trust have a proven history of not listening. They're still not listening, even now. I would like it that the 23 parents I personally feel should in some way be involved in seeing the changes, not just hearing about them, but actually seeing them. Because the 23 and then obviously the 1,000, well, just under 1,600 families who came forward, we should all be able to see that those changes are being made, and it's not just we're being told they're being made.
Julie, you know, once again, I'm so sorry for your loss. I can't even imagine what you've been through. I think, you know, you're clearly a strong woman. You're doing Olivia proud. Well done on everything that you've done. And I hope, like what you hope, that change does come. Thank you very much for your time. Mark Wallace. I mean,
thank you.
You know, I find that, I listen to that, and it gives me goosebumps. Anyone that's had children, I know you've had children as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. You know, I know that you've had children yourself, and when you're in that situation, you are so vulnerable. You trust what the doctors say to you. It's a very emotional situation, can be quite scary. So to listen and hear some of the findings in this report, it is chilling.
Indeed, and that vulnerability that you mention for Olivia, the baby we just heard about, deserved to be a young woman today, and the hundreds of other families mentioned in this report, they all deserved a different future to the one that they were given. And that vulnerability, obviously for a baby, but also for a mother and also for a family, is absolutely central to this. I think there are two big issues that really kind of crop up here. One is one about the way NHS trusts are managed and the way some of them, not just this case, think about cases like mid-staffs, for example, where you see similar systemic things. If you happen to have an organisation that gets into the mode of refusing to believe patients, refusing to listen, knuckling down, believing criticism is an attack rather than something that they ought to listen to, that can be absolutely deadly, whether it's in midwifery and obstetrics, whether it, with mid-staffs, with patients of a different profile. Then there's a second issue here that is within some parts, not all, but some parts of obstetrics and midwifery, in which there seems like there's an ideology as well as a question of medical science that comes into play. What was happening to a lot of these families in this report was they were being told that the trust believed there should be what it termed a natural birth, which meant that medical interventions that this report's found could have saved hundreds of lives were being avoided. And I've got to say, even anecdotally, mercifully, my own family have never experienced anything anywhere near as severe as this. But even anecdotally, one of my own children had an undiagnosed tongue tie at birth, meaning that they literally could not breastfeed. And that was something that medical professionals missed. Sometimes that's tricky, and I understand that. But it could have been picked up on. Instead, we found ourselves trapped for several weeks of a young baby's life where the baby was not getting the food it needed. Instead of being, there was an ideology of support to be natural, which meant that the system was geared towards saying, thumbs up, have some cake, keep on trying. And actually, for us, that was completely the wrong thing. We weren't given the actual support we needed for our baby to be happy and healthy. This is that on a much more extreme scale. It is troubling. I think that's not everyone in that field by any means, but it is troubling when the attitude towards a patient is actually they're expected. There's a lot of talk about choice and birth plans and so on that actually goes out the window in far too many cases when a medical professional of one sort or another decides that what will be done to somebody rather than what they will happen with them, and it's not always for their best interests.
Yeah, Rob, this ideology kind of pushing people towards a natural birth, often I think, anyway, it's about statistics and it's about actually a hospital wanting to tick boxes and make itself look good on various different reports. If someone's had a C-section, they haven't failed. It's not failure to deliver by C-section. Do you think sometimes, Rob, that the kind of ideology, the tick boxes, the targets, etc., get in the way of consistently good care?
Yeah, I really echo the points that Mark's made about that accountability and about this ideology of natural is best that affects this whole field in particular, I think. So I had a colleague who had her first child a few years ago, really determined to breastfeed, and baby wasn't latching on. A week later, the child's back in hospital, dehydrated, and nobody was saying, well, let's be pragmatic, bottle feeding's fine as well. And that kind of pressure on mothers, and as you say, a very vulnerable time, and you are kind of going with the flow about these things. And then you have the tick box culture as well of trying to hit targets and things like that. But also that culture of accountability and how you make sure that people are held accountable. And when things like this start to happen, because this ideology has been overreached, that there doesn't seem to be the mechanisms to make sure that there's a check, there's a quality control that says, how can we make sure this doesn't happen again? Instead, there seems to be a closing down of the shutters and assumption that that the parents must be in the wrong or they must be deluded in some way. I think that's a real problem.
And Pimana, it has happened again. It happened over and over again. This spanned 2 decades. And by the way, it took years and years for this report to come out. I would even have questions why it takes so long to investigate these things in the first place. But we talk about accountability. Lots of people are saying that they want criminal prosecutions to happen, that they want people that are being responsible to be criminally accountable. Your thoughts?
I mean, I agree with sentiments that both Mark and Rob have expressed in terms of a culture of accountability needing to be implemented within the NHS, within this specific trust, but also across other NHS trusts. I think that one thing should be clear to all of us is that where doctors go wrong or where nurses go wrong, they are stricken off the register and they can't practice medicine again. So that should give some people some comfort.
No, it won't give people comfort. If you're a mom, Pimana, whose child, I mean, there's 201 babies at least. In 94 other cases, children have got long-term injuries, including brain damage. I don't suspect that if I was the mum of one of these children, it wouldn't be enough for me to hear that sentence. Oh, well, don't worry about it, he's been struck off. I would want more than that. I'd want him in prison, quite frankly.
I think that every case needs to be looked at within its situations, and we have to be able to give doctors and nurses the ability to be able to respond to some of the things the decisions that they have made. So I couldn't say if they should or should not go to prison, because I think it really depends on the specific case. But on this specifically, I mean, my heart goes out to all the families that have had to campaign tirelessly to get accountability. They shouldn't have had to do this. And the thing that really, really concerns me is that women time and time again raised concerns and they weren't believed and they weren't listened to. You know, I was listening to PMQs today, and one of the MPs said that one of their constituents asked for a C-section and was denied a C-section. And I looked back into the history of this, and it seems that the World Health Organization at that point was pushing natural births. So this was, not just UK-wide, but it was a whole worldwide thing that they were pushing natural births. So I think that this needs to be looked at again. I think we should definitely push for a culture of change and accountability and transparency. But the thing that really concerns me here is the whistleblowing policy within the NHS. Where were the other healthcare professionals who witnessed this and who saw this? Why didn't they come forward? Why didn't they raise the alarm earlier? I mean, you said this went on for decades. So to me, I think we need to go back and make sure that NHS professionals and healthcare professionals have the power to be able to come forward without any consequences to maybe, if they're not involved in that situation, to be able to raise the alarm.
Yeah, I agree about that. And I think if you look at, I mentioned before the mid-staff scandal, and you saw the lady who very valiantly spent years being a really central driving force in knocking down doors, insisting that people paid attention to the fact there was something wrong. She was harassed, intimidated. As I recall, even things like family memorials and so on were damaged. There's a formal question about the power of and protection of whistleblowers, and there's a cultural question. Yeah. The other aspect I think we should look at in terms of criminal law is corporate manslaughter is on the statute book in the UK. Mm-hmm. If I, as a chief executive of a company, do something in such a way that I fail so recklessly to protect the life of a member of staff or a customer, then I or other people involved in the business that I run could be charged with corporate manslaughter. If it's the case that this trust repeatedly failed to learn even its own findings, refused to pay attention to the fact there was a problem, you'd never want to prejudge these things. It's important with criminal law that it's properly independent. But it would seem completely appropriate to me that ought to be considered by the relevant authorities, because hundreds and hundreds of lives have been snuffed out at the very moment when they ought to have been beginning.
I mean, I think that that's a great solution for families in order for them to feel like they've got justice. But I think long term, we need to look at getting better training for the healthcare professionals within this trust, making sure that they understand this should never happen again. And I think the thing for me, I mean, lots of members of my family are doctors and nurses. And so speaking to them about this, they were really shocked that this happened, because, the first priority of a doctor is the safety of their patient and making sure that they're okay, especially when it comes to maternity care, that they are on board with the plans of how they give birth. And if the patient wants a C-section, for example, they should be able to go forward with that. And if the doctor isn't willing, this is what I've been told, if the doctor isn't willing, they should be able to refer that mum, that individual, to another doctor who would be willing to do a C-section operation. So I don't understand why this didn't happen here and why that failure happened here. And I want to make sure that doesn't happen again. And so I think we really need to push training and, the whistleblowing.
It's not just training and whistleblowing, by the way, it's actual staff numbers. Because if we look, there's a huge shortage in midwives, for example. Pre-existing shortage of 2,000 midwives in England alone. Regular viewers will know that I had my own very challenging birth experience during the pandemic, and my heart absolutely breaks for all the families, because nothing will bring back. You've lost your baby, and for 94, nearly 100 families, their babies, their children, are living with brain damage in many cases because of mistakes that have been made during the delivery. I can't even imagine how some of them must be feeling today. If you're affected by this, absolutely my heart goes out to you. And it's all well and good having these reports, but now we need the next steps. Accountability. Will we get it? Who knows? Louise Barnett, who's the Chief Executive of Shrewsbury and Telford Hospitals NHS Trust, said the following: "Today's report is deeply distressing, and on behalf of all at the Trust, I offer our wholehearted apologies for the pain and distress that has been caused. We owe it to the families that we failed, those we care for today and in the future, and our valued colleagues providing that care, to continue to make the necessary improvements so that we are delivering the best possible care for the communities we serve." Jim is one of those people that you serve. He says he lives in Telford. He says, like the lady you've just interviewed, I have no faith that the Trust will change their policies. He says it's not just in maternity, but he feels, in his view, it's the whole way the Trust reacts to criticism on any subject. He says the NHS more generally needs to start holding senior managers and staff to account. Well, let me know your thoughts. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or @GBNews. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be looking at the Justice Secretary, Dominic Raab, wants the parole board to reconsider their decision that Baby P's mother can be released from prison. I do have to use that term mother loosely. I think if you torture your own kid for months on end, you're not a mother. Anyway, do you think she should be coming out of prison? We'll have that and more after the break.
You have no authority here, Jackie Weaver.
1 minute I have the authority, next minute I don't. Join me, Jackie Weaver, on the Mark Stein Show tonight at 8 on GB News for the latest twist in the Handforth Town Council story. I can't wait.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. A reminder as to my panel tonight, we've got Mark Wallace, who's the Chief Exec of Conservative Home, Rob Lyons, the Science Director at the Academy of Ideas, and Pamana Assad, who's a Labour councillor. Carly has been in touch saying she basically thinks this is a much bigger problem across the entirety of the NHS, broader than what was in the report. She says that she's had her own experience of NHS negligence, lost her own child, and she says destroyed her life. I've got to say, I worry as well about how broad an issue this is. Hopefully time will tell, and I'm really sorry, Carly, for your loss. Moving on, Justice Secretary Dominic Raab says that he will ask the parole board to reconsider their recommendations that baby P's mother, Tracy Connolly, be released from prison. Connolly was jailed in 2009 after admitting causing or allowing the death of her 17-month-old son, Peter, 2 years earlier. Baby P, as he became known, suffered more than 50 injuries. Connolly was released on licence in 2013, but jailed again in 2015 for breaching her parole. Obviously, this is a very emotional story. Lots of people have very strong opinions. I've got to say, I certainly have a strong opinion, and I think she's an absolute disgrace. I don't think she should ever be freed. And if I was in charge of the country, and for everyone's sake, it's a good job I'm not, personally, I would make her be sterilised so that she could never have a child again, let alone hurt one. But as I say, luckily, I'm not in charge of the country. Rob, your thoughts? Well,
throwing away the key is certainly a very attractive proposition. I can't believe anybody's got a shred of sympathy for Tracy Connolly. But I do have concerns about the justice system being fair and measured and predictable, because that's how everybody, whether they're innocent, guilty, whatever, gets justice. And so I tend to avoid making judgments without seeing all of the facts, and the jury in this case, the judge in this case, and now the parole board on multiple occasions, they at least have all of those facts in front of them and can understand the case in the round. She was given an indefinite term with a minimum of 5 years. She served 11. She's not going to be free by the what we would normally call free. She's going to be wearing a tag. So she's going to have to live at a particular place, tell the police if she's in a relationship, have her communications monitored, if she's allowed out. Certainly, I can see why Dominic Raab wants to review the case, but I wouldn't automatically say that it's wrong for her to be released. I think that it needs to be considered as much for the sake of everybody else who has some relationship with the justice system. As for Tracy Connolly, I don't.
Yeah,
for her individual case, I don't particularly care.
See, Pamana, in life, I think there's some kind of lines that you cross in society, and I think once you cross those lines, you've got no business being out in society. I don't care if you've got a tag or if you've got to tell the police I'm in a relationship. If you can give your own child 50 injuries, including a snapped spine, 8 broken ribs, sorry, but you've got no place in society, if you ask me. Am I wrong?
So it's interesting, this one. She initially didn't take fault on the death of her child, and said that she wasn't at fault on this, and that her boyfriend was at fault for his death. And then later on, she changed her mind and said that she wrote a letter to the judge saying that she takes full responsibility, and she cries herself to sleep sometimes, knowing that she hasn't been a good mother. For me, I think I look at this in terms of, if we look at her history, she grew up with a mother who had a drinking and a drug problem. She was known to social services from childhood. And then when she was 16 years old, she got into a relationship with a man who was 17 years her senior, and she had baby P at that time. So I think there's a whole range of issues here with this individual in particular. She needs help, clearly, that's quite clear. But the thing that I come to is if she's continuously a danger to society now in terms of other
Hang on, before we come to the danger of society, I want to pick you up on your point there. Are you saying that being abused as a child or having a chaotic lifestyle as a child basically gives you some kind of free pass?
No, definitely not, no. I'm saying what she needs is support, because that has clearly impacted her and clearly hasn't helped this situation in particular.
See,
Because three of her other children were taken off her and put into care.
But you know, Pimana, you know, right, I was on the social services at risk register as a child. I have had what some would call an abusive childhood. Yeah. I've got a little boy the same age as baby P. I know right from wrong. Yeah. What was done to me as a child, I wouldn't dream of inflicting on a... You know
but you're
right
a different
from
person,
wrong.
Though, Michelle. You're a different person.
Yeah, but I don't care what person I am. You know, I don't care who you are. You know that abusing a baby, snapping the spine of a baby or letting someone else do that, you know right from wrong. And I don't care what your childhood is. I really don't, Pimana.
I mean, I would agree with you that people should know what right and wrong is. But what I'm trying to say here is that she should have got support right from early on. And that support wasn't given to her from her being a 16-year-old child. So that's what I would like us to consider in the whole context of this. But in terms of her being released now, I think if she's continuously a danger to society, she should not be released and she should stay in prison.
Oh, I don't even want to consider her childhood, Mark, to me. I just think it's so... I'm sick and tired of people excusing terrible behaviour. Accept personal responsibility. It's awful when people have a terrible childhood and they need to be supported and all the rest of it, but it does not excuse bad behaviour into your adulthood. Get some personal responsibility and sort yourself out.
Of course, because...
Sorry, I just wanted to get that off my chest.
But that's one of the reasons why one of the tests that a court assesses is whether somebody is capable of being held morally culpable. If you're in a circumstance in which your childhood has literally caused you such serious mental illness that you cannot be deemed by a court to know right from wrong, then the law treats that differently. It assessed this case, it assessed that she did know right from wrong, she was culpable. Whether she's a threat to a danger to society is rightly one of the considerations. It seems to be the main thing the parole board's considered here. But there are other considerations here. I think there's the question about punishment. Rehabilitation is one function, or ought to be one function of the justice system. It often fails in that. We should do better on it. But rehabilitation is part of it. But there's also a question of punishment. And thirdly, there's a question of deterrence. And I think the kind of lines that you were talking about, I agree with Rob that we need kind of clarity, you need a kind of static clarity for people, but that involves drawing a line. And one of those lines is that if you do this particular crime, I don't think you should expect any prospect of being released.
But I don't think you should be allowed to have another child either.
Well, you'll be in prison, so hopefully you won't.
No, but if she's going to get released, I don't think... If you can do this to a child, I just don't think you should ever be allowed to be unsupervised around a child again. I certainly don't think you should ever be able to have a child again. I've just got, to me, it's just so black and white. You're a disgusting human being that's demonstrated you are not fit to parent a child. You don't get a second chance, in my book, when it comes to that topic. But I just don't know if I'm just being a bit deranged or a bit harsh, because
I think it's emotional. That's why you feel that. Because originally, when I was looking at this, I thought the same thing as you. She should not be allowed to have children ever again. But how do you practically stop that from happening, know? And is that... What are the legal ramifications?
Well, I told you what I would have done. I would make.
But what are the legal ramifications that we're setting if that is
Sure.
something that is considered?
And I think there are very disturbing kind of precedents being set if you start to get the state into the question of sterilising people. Yeah. In practice, we have a system along...
Well, all right, then I'll compromise.
We have a system like this where, in various cases, as happened to her with several of her other children, the state essentially takes children away from people they believe to be dangerous or unfit parents. That happens in a variety of different cases at birth because of what the state knows already about a parent, often from past offences and behaviour. That I think that's already a severe policy to have, but I think it's one that is on the side of responsible compared to what I would view as the unacceptable kind of return to kind of eugenics or something like that.
But you said just now, Michelle, that sort yourself out. So let me play devil's advocate. What if this person is? I don't know. But what if this person is in some way transformed? Do we allow the possibility of redemption or rehabilitation even in a terrible case like this? I think that there's been, perhaps in the sort of 70s, there was a shift towards the rehabilitation of offences and. Over time, that's been eroded, and I think that there is something positive in that, whether it's in this case or not, about saying, right, you've served your time, and then after a particular time after that, we'll say, right, OK, you can exist as a normal member of society again.
So I'll answer your question then. So do I believe in rehabilitation and redemption? Yeah, of course I do, for various things. So if you're a shoplifter, you know, can you be rehabilitated and pack it in nicking Mars bars? Yeah, of course you can. You can have a normal life. There's a line for me. Sorry, but there is. There is a line. If you torture a child, then that's it. That's it. You can't be redeemed. You're not going to have a normal life. You've done. That child don't get his life back. So no, unfortunately, and you can tell me at home what you think. I am quite hard-lined on it. I think there is a line in society. If you cross it, if you torture a child, you don't get a second chance at life. Am I wrong? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk. Tweet me @MichelleDewbs. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to shine a light on a topic that I don't think gets enough attention. Vaccine side effects. What's going on? Come back in 2 minutes.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. Now, as we all know, we've all been asked to step up and do what was right, which was to be vaccinated against COVID-19. Many of us have had 1, 2, 3, and now we're talking about 4 vaccines. We're talking about vaccinating children as young as 5. Now, let's be clear, on the whole, these are safe vaccines for the most people, but what happens when you get side effects to the vaccine? We have something called the Vaccine Damage Payment Scheme in this country, which provides a one-off tax-free payment of £120,000 if someone is severely disabled or has died as a result of side effects from the COVID vaccine. Have to say, it hasn't paid out yet a penny, despite there being deaths that have been confirmed as being as a result of the vaccine. Joining me now is Conservative MP Sir Christopher Chirp, who's put forward a proposal using the 10-minute rule motion in the House of Commons, calling for bespoke legislation. He's calling basically for the government to set up a judge-led inquiry into COVID vaccine issues, which would advise on the appropriate compensation package. Thank you very much for joining us. Sir Christopher, tell us, if you will, the essence of the bill that you're trying to get through at the moment.
Well, first of all, I'd like to ensure that the government takes seriously the symptoms of people who have suffered vaccine damage and continue to suffer, because there is a dire shortage of any proper care for them, and many of them are being ignored by the NHS, even to the extent of complaining to me that they feel as though they're being gaslighted. So that's one issue. Then there's an issue of the people who have been affected adversely, including those who've suffered bereavement. Those people need to be properly compensated and in timely fashion. That's not happening. And we also need to increase the maximum payout from 120,000, which hasn't been increased for 15 years. If that was to be brought up in line with inflation, that would be 177,000. But beyond that, we want to, I'd like to see something less rigid than the 60% disability cut-off for entitlement. Because what happens if somebody is 30% disabled? Why can't they get something? I'm not saying they should get their maximum, but why can't we have a gradated scheme rather than a scheme which cuts off all those who haven't been 60% disabled? And there are other issues as well, but that's, I think, enough to be going on with.
Now, what I found interesting, because I watched you in the House of Commons yesterday, and I was really quite disappointed to see the lack of attendance on the benches. I don't know if I've got a clip of it. If I haven't got a clip of it, I'll describe it. The benches were pretty much empty. So I wonder, how seriously do you think the issue... Oh, there you go. I'm showing it to the screen now for anyone that's watching it. If you're not watching it, I'll give you the short version. There was hardly anyone there, was there, Christopher? Do you think people are taking this issue seriously?
I don't think a lot of my colleagues are. And there were actually, several ministers on the front bench, which was better than usual. So, and I hope that they were listening. But actually, after the debate, I was talking to colleagues on both sides of the House who weren't aware of these issues, and it may be that constituents haven't written to their MPs to alert them to these problems. And I'd encourage anybody who has got such a problem to raise it with their constituency MP.
Yeah, and I find, if you even, because I do a TV show and I think about topics often and I look at what people are talking about, and I found it quite interesting, the lack of attention that people have paid to people that are vaccine injured, because to be clear, yes, I know it is safe and it has been safe for the majority of people, but there is, it's not a too small a minority. There are a number of people now that have had it confirmed by coroners that the death was as a direct result of the vaccine. But yet we haven't had a single payout from this scheme. I mean, what more evidence does the government need than a coroner's report confirming that that was the cause of death to make a payout?
Well, quite right. And a coroner's report is conclusive evidence of the cause of death. And so why not pay out on the basis of those coroner's reports? And I raised this again yesterday because some people have said that there's a battle going on between the Business Services Authority for the NHS and ministers. The Business Services Authority says it wishes to reduce this bureaucracy, but ministers are insisting that it stays. And there's a blame game going on, but the victims are the people who are the bereaved.
And do you think it's right, because the manufacturers of these vaccines have basically been indemnified, so anything that goes wrong is the responsibility currently of the government? Do you think it's right that the manufacturers have got that in place?
Well, I'd like to see the terms of that indemnity. I understand that the terms have been changed recently, and I can understand that initially there was a reason for doing that, because probably the vaccines wouldn't have been made available if it hadn't been on those conditions. But I think now we've got a lot more evidence about the effect of the vaccines on that minority of people for whom the benefit is outweighed by the disbenefit, that I think there's a case for having much more openness about this, and questioning whether we should allow the vaccine manufacturers to be completely exempt from any being held accountable. And
what's the next steps then for the bill that you're trying to get through?
Well, the bill, we're obviously reaching the end of this session of Parliament. So, as I said, this bill is a catalyst for government action and to take this issue seriously. There are 450,000 yellow card reports of adverse effects from the vaccine, and there are probably tens of thousands of people who have been seriously affected, including some people sadly dying as a result of this. The government needs to get a grip on it, and it hasn't so far.
And this is one of the contentious points of this, because what people will then push back on is say, well, hang on a second, yellow card, it's basically voluntary information. I could go on there now and say that I've had all kinds of stuff based on the vaccine. There's no real kind of weights, measures and checks. It's kind of a voluntary reporting system, so people therefore will criticise it and say, you know, you can have 250,000, 500,000 reports on there, but it doesn't count for anything because they're not proven with causation. What would you say back to that?
Well, it was only 3 years ago, Michelle, that the department responsible for the yellow cards, the MHRA, was actually encouraging people to come forward with yellow card reports on the basis that it may not be proven, but if there's a suspicion that something's gone wrong as a result of the vaccine, then the sooner we know about it, the better. Now, and they said at that time that they thought that only about 10% of adverse events from vaccines were actually being reported on the yellow cards. So encourage more people to do it. So now I think they've changed their tune because they realise that an enormous number of people have been reporting these adverse effects, and they're overwhelmed. So now, what do you want? I mean, there's obviously something seriously wrong here, and as a result of what I've done in Parliament, I've been put in contact with similar situations in other overseas parliaments where legislators are finding that they are under a lot of pressure not to challenge the establishment on these issues.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that which raises concerns to me is we're lowering the age of which we're offering these vaccines to people, so as young as 5 to be offered the vaccine. Well, the parents obviously offered it on their behalf, but you know, we've had a situation where I think of, for example, the Pfizer vaccine. You know, in America, there's been a court case there that has essentially forced data surrounding the side effects, etc., to be made public. Pfizer tried their very best to slow this kind of dissemination of information down. I think they wanted to release it at such a slow pace that it would have taken about 55, 75 years to release all the information linked to the approvals of these vaccines. That, for me, raises alarm bells and concerns. There's been calls from various different groups to actually pause the rollout to the younger children until we know a bit more about the impacts, the side effects, etc. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think we should be taking the vaccine rollout to broader groups, or do you think we should be waiting until we understand more around the side effects?
Well, I don't think we should be forcing or encouraging people to take vaccines unless we can demonstrate that the benefits from the vaccines for those individuals is greater than the risks. And the government has conceded that there are a group of people for whom the risks are greater than the benefits. I've asked if we can find evidence so that those people can self-identify, and the government has held back on providing that information. And why is it holding back on such information? And I've got 16 other questions, I think, which I put down, which should have been answered by now. They haven't been answered. And the government seems to be in denial about these issues. It wants to promote the propaganda in support of the vaccines, because obviously vaccination is in general a good thing. But I think it would be better for the government to actually face up to the fact that for some people, vaccines are a disaster, a small minority. But face up to that and then deal with it accordingly and say, if you do the right thing for public health, then we will see you right with our ex gratia compensation scheme.
Absolutely. I'm just going to open this up. Mark Wallace, you join me now. Your thoughts on this topic?
Well, I've got to say, the clip you showed of the attendance on the green benches, I don't think it's any particular reflection on this topic, certainly not on Chris, who will know from many years of 10-minute rule bills that some of his colleagues don't pay attention to all that they perhaps ought to that goes on the order paper. The existence of the VDPS is obviously a good thing. There's obviously reforms you could have. That keeping up with inflation at minimum, I think, is clearly a correct thing that ought to happen. You don't want fiscal drag to kind of eat away at the value of this. The existence of the scheme does give the lie, of course, to what we heard from various anti-vaxxer lobbies over the last couple of years on the topic of indemnity, who made out that indemnity of corporations meant that there would never be any compensation for damage, which turns out not to be...
From the manufacturer.
No, but indeed. But some people wrongly portrayed that as meaning that if there was any damage, there would never be any compensation. And there is a scheme to do that.
Yeah, but hang on, it's not effective though, is it? We're in a situation now where it has been ruled, before I even get into 60% disability or serious illness, it has been ruled by coroners that there have been cases of deaths specifically caused by this, and yet not a single payout.
Indeed, and that's why I say I think the system itself needs reform. It should certainly get faster where there are conclusive cases like that. I do take issue with Chris when you describe yellow card reports as vaccine effects. They're vaccine events, so they're events that take place in the particular period after someone's been vaccinated. Any and all events can be reported there, and the point in which they rightly encourage people to report, is that you gather that evidence and then, as a scientist on the panel to whom I'll defer, you then study them to work out what's causation and what's coincidence. Obviously, particularly when you're talking about vaccinating, say, people in their 90s, sadly, a certain proportion of people in their 90s in any given fortnight will end up dying, for example. And that would be wrong to categorise those as automatically being effects just because they've been reported as events.
Yeah, so it's a starting point, not an ending point. Rob, your thoughts?
Well, I spoke to, a year or so ago for an article, spoke to some people from the last time around, which was the swine flu vaccines. And there were quite a lot, I would say a lot, but several score, I suppose, of people who were badly affected by narcolepsy as a result of one of the vaccines that was used and approved very, very quickly in relation to swine flu. And the scheme, it seems to me, at the moment is really inadequate. It doesn't take into account the level of there should be much more flexibility about, so that if somebody's really seriously damaged, they can't work, whatever, 120 grand is not going to do any good for them, and be more flexible about paying out smaller amounts as well. It should be better. If you're going to indemnify the drug companies, then you should take on that responsibility on behalf of the population as a whole. I think the vaccines are fantastic, by the way. They really, really are. They're far better than we ever could have expected at the start, and came much more quickly as well. And they were properly tested to give the lie to that. But we should be looking after the people, the very small minority of people who were affected by these things. I think that's absolutely reasonable. Obviously, it's going to be difficult, because that point that Mark was making about correlation doesn't equal causation. Just because one thing happens or another doesn't mean that it was caused by the vaccine. And a lot of these negative effects can be caused by the virus. In fact, they're more likely to be caused by the virus than by the vaccine. But nonetheless, the principle should be there that the scheme should be quick, should pay out effectively, and especially when it's something as clear-cut as a death. I think that there's room for better action on that.
Hamana, briefly?
So I think that the first thing to say is that the vaccine wasn't mandatory, and so people weren't forced. And
well, they were coerced, though.
But if the government had a list, as you were saying, about people who were at risk and who might have been at risk at getting the vaccine, then that should have been made available and public information, so that those individuals who were at risk didn't get the vaccine, if that was the case. But where there is, and there have been deaths, and that can be proved that was through the vaccine, then I think that these payouts should be made. However, I think that most people probably don't know this information and probably haven't been able to come forward to their MPs to share that information. And I think we need to be able to gather that to build a proper case, because if people have been impacted by this and their livelihoods have been impacted by this, then I think that they should be given payment.
I've got to say, by the way, I do find it fascinating how all of a sudden it's really difficult to prove causation, etc., and linking it to an event such as the vaccine. But it didn't seem to be that difficult to link things to COVID. That seemed to be, everyone was very comfortable with the whole case where within 28 days of a test, and anyone that's had kind of COVID often getting written down as a COVID death. Anyway, Christopher Chirp, I have to say, personally, I think what you're doing on this topic is absolutely wonderful. I respect it greatly. I wish you success with your bill. All of us that have been asked to have the vaccine, which is indeed all of us, should want an effective scheme in place to compensate if and when it goes wrong.
Can I thank you very much for giving this the oxygen of publicity, because so few media outlets are prepared to do that.
Yeah, and shame on them. That's what I say. Anyway, that's all I've got time for. Have yourselves a very good evening. I'll see you tomorrow.
Hi there, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Rain and snow is currently clearing south across the UK, followed by cold Arctic winds and the risk of icy patches first thing Thursday. This cold front is bringing a marked change, with Arctic air following south and in some places temperatures dropping more than 10 Celsius compared with a few days ago. It's also bringing a mixture of rain and hill snow, with the snow increasingly coming to lower levels across southeast England as it clears during the early hours of Thursday. Don't be surprised in the southeast, particularly if you're somewhere like the Chilterns or the Downs, to wake up to a slushy covering of snow. Won't last long though, and in the north we've already seen some snow, and it will continue through the night with some icy patches first thing. A widespread frost to begin the day, temperatures well below freezing for some